I'm Gary Berman, host of the Unsung Cyber Heroes Adventures podcast. Our mission is to shine the light on the unsung heroes who toil in anonymity to keep us safe online while at work, home, at school. I'm the least likely person to be interviewing some of the world's top people in the cybersecurity community because until recently, a few years ago, I knew nothing about cybersecurity or hacking, but everything about what it means to be a victim of a prolonged series of insider cybercrimes perpetrated by a small group of employees who essentially cloned my company. While I was out due to a serious accident, unable to receive justice due to the difficulty of attribution and obfuscation, I've pivoted from victim to advocate after reading Cybersecurity for Dummies and being lost only 10 pages in. Well, that's when I realized there had to be a better way to distill complicated cybersecurity and tech information into something that everyone would understand and ideally enjoy. Superhero comics. My talented team and I have converted blinded, real-life stories of cybercrime into the cyber hero adventures, defenders of the digital universe, and available at cyberheroescomics.com at no cost. I recently had the opportunity to speak at the Software and Supply Chain Assurance Forum. That's where I met today's guest. Hi, Charlie.
Hi, Gary. How you doing?
I'm great, thanks.
Good. I wanted to take the opportunity today to talk with you a little bit about the CMMC, or the Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification program that the Defense Department put together. It's a collection of publicly available standards gathered by the Defense Department to help us understand how to protect confidential information, like our own intellectual property, information about our employees, or information that our clients want us to keep confidential as contractors to them. It's really critical. Later this year, we'll see mandates from the Department of Defense for their contractors and supply chain members to be certified against it. We'll start seeing that at the end of the year and more heavily into next year. But the America Small Business Development Centers and others are promoting its use outside the Defense Department to protect confidential information, particularly as small businesses that have trouble trying to figure out what to do.
Well, tell me a little bit more about this, Charlie, because especially right now, when there are so many small and medium businesses that are increasingly vulnerable because they're working at home, how is the CMMC standards applicable to the larger community?
Well, we all need to do what we can to protect information. Right now, a lot of businesses have employees working at home that never did. They have kids running around the house while they're trying to do their work. So we really need to have these businesses understand how to protect the confidential information of the company and their clients. Information may be just sitting around on desktops or on the computers in their house. So we really need to nail this down. The CMMC itself, though, has 5 different levels of certification. One is just a basic level of certification that our organization is providing support for under a grant that we received, so small businesses can protect the information that they gather during that process of assessing themselves. You can imagine, as an organization is doing an assessment, very critical information is being gathered about whether they're doing something well or they're not doing it at all. And we don't want that information on paper laying around in an office, and we don't want that information put in insecure places like spreadsheets and documents that are just on the systems that they're trying to protect. So the CMMC has 5 levels. The first level is just basic, and the basic level where organizations perform basic cyber hygiene and may be able to perform these practices on an ad hoc manner and may not be able to rely on documentation. There's a second level, which is the intermediate level, where cyber hygiene processes actually have documentation. So you'll see policies in place. The level 3 companies show that these good hygiene processes or cyber hygiene processes are managed. Level 4 the proactive level, where companies actually have their processes being reviewed on a regular basis. Level 5 is where you might suspect the highest level of security would be for just things that are really important. They require an organization to standardize and optimize processes implemented across the whole organization. So they're looking at the way that not only documenting it and reviewing it, but they're trying to figure out ways to optimize the security.
You know, one of the interesting things, Charlie, that I've listened and learned from is that many small and medium businesses don't think they have anything worthwhile for hackers to steal. Tell us a little bit about your perspective on that based on your interesting kind of origin story. How did you get to be involved in your current work?
Well, I am a licensed cyber insurance advisor, and I got that license because I was really interested in protecting information that you're talking about, and trying to figure out ways that the insurance industry could help out. I don't sell insurance, but I'm very interested in the role of insurance, and I'll talk about that in just a second. Before that, I've been part of many federal large enterprise kind of programs across the federal government. I provide the software to track the maintenance of the space shuttle, where we really tracked in detail all kinds of parts. And if you can imagine that any one of the organizations that were responsible for the space shuttle had a cybersecurity problem, or had their information given to someone that was against us, they could create havoc in that supply chain. So and there are the NASA has a lot of small businesses in their supply chain. The Defense Department has a lot of small businesses in their supply chain. So we have all these critical weapon systems that I put systems in to track maintenance of again, and actually help develop some of the weapon systems earlier in my career. That many small businesses are part of that process. If a schematic or plan or a process gets jeopardized, where like the Chinese right now are stealing information from us left and right, we're in real problems. So this is really important to small businesses to do their duty to protect information. Outside the Defense Department, if you're a lawyer or a doctor and you have confidential information about your clients, these are real critical things like divorce divorce papers, or information about maybe an acquisition of a company that if it got out, it could create a lot of problems. If you're a doctor and your client's information got out, this is really important information, and your client will not be happy. So we really need to do everything that we can to protect this information. And one of the really things that appeals to me about the CMMC is that if you're doing something and something happens where one of your clients' information is breached, or a series of clients of information are breached, you're going to be standing in front of a judge. The judge asks you what kind of care did you have for this information, and your answer is, I did the best I could, or I brought Fred in here, and Fred's a really great cyber person. That may be insufficient at some point. We'd like to have the answer be what the organization has gone through some level of certification. And since this certification addresses confidential information, when you're in front of a judge, if you said that you followed the Defense Department's guidance to handle confidential information and you're certified at the appropriate level, you're going to be a lot better off in front of a judge, but you're also doing a much better service for your client. So we really need to protect this information for our clients.
That makes a lot of sense, and of course, one of the most significant attack vectors across an enterprise or a small, medium business is ransomware. What has your experience been about ransomware? What do you see, the trends in that area?
Well, this is definitely one of the most one of the things that we're the most nervous about, right? Where a company comes, what ransomware does is someone puts a bug onto your computer. You might press a link on an email, or there's other ways to get these go to a bad website. They'll inject something onto your computer. Basically what they do is they'll encrypt your whole drive so you can't use it, then send you a message. And it's a ransom message. They'll say, we'll give you the encryption keys for that if you provide the amount of money that we're asking, and typically in Bitcoin, so it can't be traced. This is a big concern. The insurance industry is showing this as our biggest threat right now to them. So it's a bad thing. You may pay this money to these organizations, and they may or may not provide you with the keys to unencrypt your drive. So if you don't have it backed up, if you don't have good cyber hygiene of backing things up on a regular basis, your business could go out of business because you're losing all your intellectual property, basically.
You know, the FBI has been on kind of both sides of the question of whether or not to pay ransomware. What's your take on that?
Well, I have to be really careful how I answer that question. I think I really don't want to be in a position to give anybody an advice to whether they should do that or not. I think there's many people who say that what's your alternative to that? If your alternative is that you're going to go out of business, then you have to make an informed business decision. Is this something that you're willing to take a risk on by doing that? So that's a personal decision and how you handle risk. We are starting to track who is paying or who these people are that are performing these ransomware attacks, and tracking who's paying and who's not. So there are some sources that will tell you that, but from my own mind, I really can't give advice like that. That would be an individual organization's decision whether they want to do that or not.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, how do the criminals monetize this kind of information?
Well, in the case of healthcare information, healthcare records are worth a lot, right? So we all think, well, if somebody gets a hold of my social security number or something else, then that's a big deal. Well, you can buy everybody's social security number 10 cents on the dollar right now. There's so much of it out there. Who doesn't know the last 4 digits of your social security number, right? You've given it out to so many places. So I think that, so they monetize information like doctors' records. Well, they can sell your social security number, but they'll get into your checking account and they'll withdraw money. I know a very senior person in the cybersecurity world who had her checking account hacked. She went into the bank and closed that account down, then moved her money into another account in the same bank. 2 hours later, there was someone in Miami that was negotiated a printed check on the new account at a check cashing service. So they're being very sophisticated about these things. You really need to keep an eye on your checking account. Credit card companies are doing a better job of informing you of potential risk, but it's really good practice to be checking on your credit card information to make sure people aren't charging against it right now.
You know, one of the most prevalent attacks right now and really dangerous for small to medium businesses, and actually all size businesses, is what's called business email compromise. And we actually featured a real life story of that in one of our editions of the comic, whereby a CEO was ostensibly at a charity golf tournament, a legitimate charity golf tournament, sent an email to accounts payable that he wanted to make a $50,000 donation. Of course, it was all legitimate looking from the CEO's account. The accounts payable person complied and transferred the $50,000. The CEO came in on Monday, and the accounts payable person said, "Oh, I took care of the wire transfer." Boom! It all just blew up.
Well, I'm really glad you brought that up. So this is happening a lot. Companies are being tracked. Like if you're a contractor, you might be someone that's like a home contractor that all you're doing is remodeling. And what the bad guys are doing, they're tracking your activity. If they know that your client just sent you $50,000 so that you can go to Home Depot and get the products and serve the products that are necessary for them to perform your home remodeling, and they're tracking that information via your computer, they know that money is available in your account. So those are the kinds of activities that will happen against you. When they know the money's in your account, they'll start doing those kind of trickery things to get that out. They'll ask you, somebody may call you up or send you an email and say, you need to wire this money back, or you need to do something with those funds. And it may be an employee that is in the office that has the ability to do that, but that has the ability to do that. It's exactly what you're talking about. So we need to put these controls in place. So we'll go back to the CMMC for a second. The CMMC provides guidance on what to do for those kinds of things. That if you're going through the CMMC, there's a framework there that helps you walk through the controls that are necessary to protect that information. And so I'm glad you said that, because it's one thing knowing about this, but it's another thing knowing how we can put a process in place to ensure that these things don't happen. When I was describing the different levels of the CMMC earlier, you notice the first level is that people just are aware of things, that the general organization is aware, they're practicing things, but they have no way of documenting them. What's really important is when you start getting into the level 2 and the level 3 levels of the CMMC, there's processes in place, there's policies in place that employees know about. So in the case that you just brought up, employees would understand that be informed that there's a policy in place for any wiring of information, that there's going to have to be some level of authentication of that request, that they just can't send information without having that control satisfied, right? And so that's what we need. We need to, just like the banking industry has controls in place to protect money, insurance or lawyers have controls in place to protect the confidential information associated with their clients. We need to have controls in place to protect our cybersecurity and our data.
You know, one of the interesting things that we're really seeing an uptick right now, in part because of the rollout of 5G, is cyber attacks on your mobile devices. What's your perspective on that?
Well, things are going to happen a lot faster, right? So because things can happen so much faster when the 5G comes out, criminals are going to have the ability to try a lot more and do things a lot faster. So I think we do need to protect what we're doing. I think that I'm very concerned that a lot of the 5G networks have a substantial amount of intellectual property of the Chinese government. So you'll notice that, like, the Defense Department is pulling out Chinese-made cameras. They're pulling out anything made by the Huawei. I always pronounce that wrong. We're just really concerned about these different nation states having a role in the 5G world. So you can read a lot about that concern right now just Google 5G cybersecurity concerns, and you'll have enough to read about that.
Well, interestingly, there's been a lot of information coming out now about some of the vulnerabilities in Zoom, the very technology we're using right now. And Zoom is really working diligently to patch vulnerabilities. What's your advice about using, video conferencing systems?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because this is something that a lot of people are doing. It's so important for us to be keeping in contact with other people right now. So we really depend on these resources. Interesting enough, I tried to buy a new webcam yesterday, and they're more scarce than toilet paper, right? So that shows you that more and more people are actually doing things on Zoom. And what you'll see, which I think was very responsible of Zoom, is they put passwords in on their requests now, so that when you send a Zoom request to family, friends, or working people, that you actually have to have a password to get in. That's the standard for it, or the default setting, and that's where most of the problems were coming from. People were what they call Zoom bombing. I guess that's a new term. They were bombing into people's Zoom sessions and doing things that were not very nice. Right? So I think they're being very responsible about what they're doing, and they're taking actions quickly.
So as we're winding down here, what are some of the things that are keeping you up at night about all this stuff, Charlie?
Well, that people aren't paying attention enough. So I remember speaking with you earlier where I said, when I speak in public, the first thing I do is say that we are really at a true world war. I think this is really, we are at war. And if you don't think that we're at war, I ask people in the conference to go out and have a donut and a cup of coffee, because I'm not here to kind of convince people to do something to scare them about this, because they haven't heard enough about what's going on right now, and they're not doing anything. I'm not sure we're going to convince them. So what we really need to do is have the people that really care, that have intellectual property and information of others, that recognize that they really need to do something about this. And the CMMC that we're looking at right now and we're promoting is really a great first step to move to protecting that confidential information. So I'd really like to see people take advantage of that. On our website, we have a link to our free module for companies to be able to take advantage of the CMMC. There's actually another module that's ahead of it. It's called Cybersecurity First Steps. I think companies are afraid of assessments. So we put out Cybersecurity First Steps in a very secure environment, one of the top secure environments for the government has declared secure, that companies can go in there and understand where they're vulnerable a little bit, understand the concepts of malware, multi-factor authentication, encryption, different awareness things that they can do themselves, kind of find out where they're at, get warmed up, and be aware. Then they can step into the more formal assessment process, into the CMMC module, where they can take that experience and that knowledge that they learned in the awareness module and apply it to something that they can do, they can actually act on and get help with. So as they're going into that module, we're telling them that we don't expect them to understand the answers to these things or have the answers to these things, but it's so important for them to understand what they don't know and then seek professional help to fill in the gaps that they find in the assessment.
You know, one of the interesting things that I've learned about is that there's almost this misallocation of funding against cybersecurity threats because of the top 500 cybersecurity firms by revenue, a very small percent offer security awareness and training, and the overwhelming majority is, our technology solutions. And some of the big enterprises, they might have 75 or 100 or more different cybersecurity solutions in what they call their stack, and yet about 90% of all cybersecurity vulnerabilities and hack are caused by simple human error.
Oh, sure. That's true. Both have value, so we can say that. But what we're addressing on our website are things that people can read and something that they can act on, something that they can give their employees. We have 2 videos up there right now, and they're only 1 minute and 20 seconds long. So one of the things that we realized when we're talking about a lot of small businesses, people don't have time right now to sit around, probably even to finish this session, that they don't have the kind of time or aren't taking the time to go to do things. But if we can send them little videos on their phone that their employees can look at and just be aware, just really be aware of what they're doing and understand the impact on their organization. We put some PDFs that organizations can read. And if they understand these things, they'll go a long way to protecting their organization. Then, of course, we have the more formal processes that are tracking through the awareness questionnaire and the more detailed assessment. But really, addressing what the people need to do is so important. Just to be aware, we can't assume that any of our employees are aware of any of the things that we've just talked about, like clicking on links that through their company's web emails. We shouldn't be clicking on links unless we're hovering over them, and there's some really good habits that you'll learn by looking at the content that we have on there. Just some really simple things that can go a long way. Then that last 20% of the work means that we have to be a little bit more diligent beyond just awareness and actually get into action and do things. Put software and hardware in place when it's necessary, and put more formal processes in place as we have more and more important information. We're seeing laws right now that are requiring us to protect this information. So it's not a matter even of us thinking whether we have important information or not. If we have information about people on our systems, there are laws that require us to protect that information. If we violate those laws, it's very substantial. There's a very substantial penalty for that. So we all have confidential information if we're running a business. If We have employee information, our own personal information, information about our clients, information about our products and services that we're offering. We all have confidential information, and we need to take action now.
So, Charlie, on behalf of a grateful community, thanks so much for what you and your colleagues do. For those of our audience who are listening and don't have the ability to see your website behind you, how can people get more information?
Well, you can go to America's SBDC, America's plural, SBDC.org. And when you pull down the resource menu, you'll see one of the resources is cybersecurity, and that's where we put a new site up this week, and that site is going to have more and more information and more help for small businesses. Of course, our small business development centers, we have 4,000 advisors at 1,000 locations throughout the United States and our territories. If you Google Small Business Development Center and whatever state that you're in, you'll be able to get local information as well about what they're doing locally for cybersecurity. Maybe they'll help you find someone that can help you through this whole process. They're a great resource.
Well, Charlie, thanks so much. Like I said, as I began, this interview with you, you are one of the unsung cyber heroes who toil in anonymity to keep us safe, and we're incredibly grateful. For our audience, if you have other unsung heroes that you'd like to consider having appearing on our podcast, just send me an email at Gary@cyberheroescomics.com. Thanks, stay safe, stay home.